We all know when World War II started, right? September 1st, 1939. But what if I told you that wasn't the beginning? What if World War II started years earlier, in the mountains of Manchuria, or in the highlands of Ethiopia, or a quiet corner of China where a gunshot on a bridge would trigger a conflict deadlier than most of Europe could imagine? And what if some historians, respected ones, believe we've been telling the wrong origin story all along? So, when did World War II really begin? The traditional start date of World War II is September 1st, 1939, when the Wehrmacht stormed across the Polish border and ignited the fuse of blitzkrieg across Europe. Within 48 hours, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and soon after, the war was dragged into the abyss. This date, clear, dramatic, and well documented, has become the canonical beginning of World War II in Western historiography. But history is rarely so tidy. Beyond the neat borders of European memory lies a broader, more complex picture. One in which other nations, other peoples, and other wars argue for an earlier starting point. One of the earliest and most forceful challenges comes from East Asia. On September 18, 1931, a train track in Manchuria exploded. The Japanese army claimed it was an act of sabotage by Chinese dissidents. It wasn't. The explosion was staged by Japanese officers as a pretext to invade northeastern China. The incident was the spark that ignited Japanese conquest of Manchuria. Within months, the region had been transformed into the puppet state of Manchukuo, with a former Qing emperor installed as a figurehead. The international response? Condemnation without consequence. The League of Nations labelled the invasion illegal, but took no meaningful action. Japan, unrepentant, simply walked out of the League. For Chinese historians, including Oxford's Rana Mitter, this wasn't just a regional border war. It was the first open act of fascist imperialism in the 1930s, a direct challenge to the world order, a precursor to the expansionist violence soon to erupt in Europe. The Chinese government today officially commemorates September 18th as the beginning of what it calls the Chinese People War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. To millions in East Asia, World War II didn't begin in Poland, it began in Manchuria, nearly a decade earlier. And the violence didn't stop there. On July 7, 1937, at the Marco Polo Bridge just outside Beijing, a skirmish between Japanese and Chinese troops spiraled into full-scale war. Japan's invasion of China was no mere military expedition. It was a brutal, years-long campaign that saw cities razed, civilians massacred, and entire provinces consumed in bloodshed. Though, again, the world did little in response. The Second Sino-Japanese War lasted 8 years and claimed over 20 million lives, making it one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. And yet for decades, many Western narratives relegated it to the sidelines, a prelude to the real war in Europe. Historians like Zhu Zhong and Rana Mitter have pushed back forcefully, arguing that the war in Asia was not merely parallel to World War II, but central to it. Japan's aggression, unchecked by the global community, created a second front in a truly global conflict long before Germany marched into Poland. But the erosion of peace wasn't confined to Asia. In 1935, another fascist power made its move. Italy invaded Ethiopia, one of the few independent African nations not already carved up by colonialism. The campaign was brutal. Italy used chemical weapons, bombed civilian centers, and massacred Ethiopian soldiers and villagers alike. Emperor Haile Selassie, exiled but undaunted, stood before the League of Nations and warned the world, "It is us today, it will be you tomorrow." His words went unheeded. The League imposed sanctions, but not on oil, Italy's lifeblood. The sanctions failed, and Italy completed its conquest. For historians like A.J.B. Taylor and Patrick Finney, this was a crucial turning point. It was proof that the post-World War I system of a collective security designed to prevent another global war was hollow. The failure to stop Italy sent a clear message to Germany. The democracies would not act decisively to stop aggression. Then, in 1938, Germany annexed Austria. There was no resistance. German troops were welcomed with flowers and flags. The West issued stern words, but no action. Then came Munich. In September 1938, Britain and France, desperate to preserve peace, pressured Czechoslovakia into ceding the Sudetenland to Germany. The Munich Agreement, led by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, is now infamous, a symbol of appeasement. Chamberlain returned home declaring peace for our time. But Hitler was emboldened, not satisfied. He saw Munich, not as a compromise, but as a weakness. Historians like Ian Kershaw and Richard J. Evans view the betrayal of Czechoslovakia as a moral and strategic failure. For democratic nations in Eastern Europe, it was more than that. It was abandonment. Many post-communist scholars and leaders have argued that Munich, not Poland, marked the true beginning of the war. A democratic ally was sacrificed, fascist expansion was rewarded, and the stage was set for everything that followed. Even the events of September 1939, so often portrayed as a clean-cut beginning, are even more complicated than they appear. On September 1st, Germany invaded Poland from the west, but on September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. It had been agreed upon in secret weeks earlier in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty between Hitler and Stalin that carved up Eastern Europe in advance. Yet only Germany was declared the enemy. Britain and France declared war on Hitler, but not on Stalin. For Polish scholars, this is a glaring double standard. For Poland, World War II was a two-front war from day one. Millions would suffer under both German and Soviet occupations. To portray Stalin as a later ally, rather than original co-aggressor, these scholars argue is to rewrite history and to whitewash atrocity. And so we return to the central question: when did World War II begin? The answer depends on where you stand. The date one chooses to mark the beginning of World War II often reveals more about perspective than chronology. For the West, the narrative traditionally begins with Germany's aggression in Poland. For East Asia, it begins years earlier with Japan's imperial onslaught. For those focused on international law and collective security, the failures in Ethiopia or the betrayals at Munich offer the clearest signs of war. What is clear across all these perspectives is that World War II did not erupt suddenly. It metastasized gradually, enabled by complacency, opportunism, and fear. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Odd Historian. If you enjoyed the episode, please give a like as it can really help the channel grow, and subscribe for more. And if you want to delve deeper into the different perspectives of when World War II started, there are books in the description.